Stay tuned because for the next 60 minutes, Motorsports Unlimited is on the air. Hi, I'm Jerry Bryant, and these are the lovely ladies of motorsports. And all this hour, we're going to have 60 minutes.
Hi, everybody. Allow me to interrupt for a moment. I'm Patty Borowitz, and this is the 1244th edition of Motorsports Unlimited. Today, we're turning back the calendar nearly 10 years to remind you it's possible to build your own GT40 using the fabulous but long ago discontinued Pontiac Fiero chassis. With winter approaching and car projects beginning, we don't want you to forget about this possibility. Pontiac Fieros are still available at reasonable prices, even though they haven't been made since 1988. Samantha, help me.
Today, we're taking you to Barrington, Illinois to follow up on a story that started about a year ago. If you'll recall, V8 Archie, he's the man who created the technology to stuff small block Chevy V8s into the diminutive little Pontiac Fiero. This made it one of the coolest, fastest street rod sports car on the planet at a very low cost. Anyway, like the rest of us, he's been dreaming of a GT40 Ford for years and felt the Fiero chassis with the Corvette engine could be a basis for a way of realizing that dream. How did it work out? Let's take a look.
Some cars over the years got the lines just right, and I mean exactly right. I'm thinking of the Ford Cobra. I'm thinking of the Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing Coupe. I'm even thinking of the 57 Chevy. Some cars got the lines just right and in the process became classics. The Ford GT40 was such a car. And Archie, if you would, let's step over by the car now. This is your handiwork. As a matter of fact, we were out here probably close to a year ago, and this thing was just under construction at that time. And I think the way we characterized it was we were doing a show about the Fiero and the finale, and we said those are real easy to do. Anybody can do those, and this one is hard to do, but the results are awesome.
It does take a lot of work to do this. It's heavily modified Fiero chassis, and it is the correct Fiero wheelbase, but the chassis has been modified quite a bit. And it is a lot of work. It's the opposite spectrum from the opposite end of the spectrum from the Fiero and finale.
You're exactly right. Now, if you would please introduce yourself to the audience.
My name's Archie. I do V8 Fiero engine conversion kits. You've been out to the place a few times, and do some custom bodies too.
Matter of fact, this is one of those places that I'd love to go to. It reminds me a little bit of Larry Claypool's shop, those of you who are familiar with the shows we've done down at Larry Claypool's. And I hope you will be complimented by this, but both Claypool and your shop reminds me very much of how I think it might be in England. Does that make sense?
Yeah, actually, yeah, that does make sense.
It does have that kind of a charm to it. It's just most exquisite work being turned out by these shops that are not high-tech laboratory experiences. Fair enough?
Yeah, okay, I buy that.
Okay. In any event, we've had Archie on the show many times. As a matter of fact, those of you who have been following Chuck, our cameraman, Chuck Hitzenthaler's car project over the years, the reason Chuck did a V8 or a Corvette-powered Fiero was because a few years ago we came out here. We're in, this is South Barrington?
This is Barrington.
Just Barrington, okay.
Please remember, this show was originally taped nearly 10 years ago. V8 Archie has since moved to McChesney Park near Rockford, Illinois.
Powered Fieros, and we talked about it, that the Fiero was a wonderful car with fully independent suspension and disc brakes all the way around, and a mid-engine, had all the right things. The only thing the Fiero ever lacked was it didn't have any power. And by sticking a Corvette motor in, of course, you got all the power in the world and a great balanced chassis and all the rest of it. Just a wonderful, wonderful combination. Well, Chuck got so excited about it when we were out that time that he created his own V8 Fiero, and what a piece that is. You got to admit, Archie, he did a great job.
It's pretty nice.
Now,
it's
wait a
pretty
minute.
nice for Chuck.
Chuck's
become a pretty good friend over the last couple of years, and
you didn't see it with the turbocharger on it, though, did you?
No. I think
it's still growing. Trust me.
Yeah.
It's going to be the baddest Fiero out of this shop. Trust me.
Well, it could be.
It's going to be badder than yours. You're going to see. This is ego involved. He's real proud of his own work and
even on TV, I won't admit it. We'll just let it go and see where it goes. But Chuck's car is pretty nice right now.
Okay. In any event,
the bar keeps getting raised, though.
No question about it. And the The V8 Fieros are awesome cars, as I've already suggested, because it's got all the right pieces, all the pieces that every exotic car in the world, Lamborghini Diablo, or I guess we would refer to the Lamborghini Murcielago now, or the Ferraris. God, Ferrari people kill me, but it's getting confusing. All of them, same basic engineering layout, mid-engine, fully independent suspension, disc brakes all the way around for a great car balance, and it also gives you an awesome, sexy look to the car. Let's talk for a minute about the GT40 and its history. You know, I was thinking about it on the way out. I believe the first GT40 was 1964.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, they ran it for about 4 years, something like that?
4 or 5 years. They won a lot of races with them.
Including, well, we'll get to that in a second. The GT40 was a very important car in the history, in fact, in the history of Ford Motor Company. And those of you, and Chuck, show the audience the car, those of you that look at this and say, gee, I never saw a Ford that looked anything like that, you're probably correct, because they only made 200 of them, and only 31 of them were ever made for the street. And essentially what this was, Ford Motor Company was trying, in fact, the deal was almost done to buy Ferrari. And somewhere at the last minute, the deal went south because Enzo Ferrari didn't like something. Do you remember do you know what the details were?
I heard that Ferrari backed out of the deal.
Oh yeah, Enzo Ferrari.
For no good reason at all.
For no good reason at all.
Well,
at least
that's what we're going to say.
That's what we're going to say. In any event, but Ford got so mad about it that they said, okay, we are going to design a Ford car to go to, and this Le Mans is a famous 24-hour race in France every year, and it's, among Europeans, it's probably considered the most important race of the century, much like we might think of the Indianapolis 500. Very important race in Europe, and it has been a Ferrari and Porsche playground for so many years, and Ford, this American company, comes along and says, you know, they're going to have a car to compete at Le Mans. Well, son of a gun, the Ford GT40 won Le Mans 3 years in a row, unprecedented. And the only thing that changed things was somehow the rules body decided to manipulate the rules and the cars became illegal.
That's what I understand, yeah. That's what I've read.
Exactly. There's a lot of politics in racing, no question about it. But it didn't undermine the achievements of the GT40. The GT40 Ford was an awesome car. I will also tell you this, there's all kinds of politics involved with the enthusiasm for these too. There were many Americans that said, no, it's not really an American car. Yes, it was built under contract from Ford, but it was actually built in England. I don't know if we count that, but all that whining seemed to go away after the first Le Mans win.
After they started winning, yeah.
After they started winning. So this was an awesome car, but there's lots of cars in history that have won races. And we never heard of them about it because they didn't have the lines just right. Well, the GT40, like the Ford Cobra, like the Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing Coupe, got the lines just right. And I will tell you this, over the years, more people have talked to me about building kit cars, have wanted to build a GT40 than any other car that I can think of. That's how compelling the lines of the body is. I'm sure you're aware of all it.
Well, I've always wanted one since the 60s when I seen them race on television, you know, once in a while, recorded race, not like you have today. But I've always wanted one, and the only way I can afford one is to build one myself, so I did.
Well, plus the fact you're V8 Archie and you're intimately familiar. We're going to talk about this. I want to get into the technical details of this car as to why. First of all, I sat in an original GT40 Ford, and I can tell you this. I know now why there were only 31 of them that were ever made for the street. It's a terrible street car. There's no room inside of it whatsoever. Your knees are kind of up to your chest. The original GT40 Ford is a monocoque construction. In order to get adequate chassis stiffness, you've got to fold up a lot of sheet metal, and all the empty area in the car that would normally be empty is full of sheet metal in order to get chassis rigidity, and all that makes a very rigid chassis, but doesn't leave much room for a driver and passenger.
Well, the more you bend that metal around to get the rigidity, the less room you leave for the passenger.
Exactly, and so my feeling, or the driver or the passenger, so my feeling on the thing when I drove it is I says, boy, this is like being in a space capsule. It's a very cool looking car. But I don't think this is ever going to be a really streetable car, because while a race car driver, that's his office, he's at work. A person just out for a pleasure drive doesn't want to be that cramped or confined. One of the reasons it had to be that way was because the engine is mid-engine and it was mounted longitudinally, meaning forward and aft, just like normal traditional American cars where the engines are in the front and they're mounted this way. This was behind the driver and passenger, the engine mounted going forward and aft. That takes up a lot of space, and then of course you have to have a bell housing and the transmission and all the rest of it. So it had to push the driver and passenger way forward in the car, and in order to get the right size car to be competitive at racing, they just really jammed up the driving compartment, for that matter the passenger compartment, although that was really that was just because they had rules. They had to have a passenger compartment. So it wasn't really, as pretty as the lines of the car were, it wasn't really a practical application for the street. Well, it is now, and we're going to get into the technology of this because this is pretty special. The point I want to make, and I'm going to make it over and over again because I think it's probably the most important point about this car. It is dimensionally correct. It's a GT40.
Wheelbase wise, and the exterior shape of the body is a GT40. We just modified the chassis to fit the body.
We'll get there. Okay. So in other words, when we looked at the Fiero and the Finale that we showed you about a year ago or so, those cars were designed entirely different. There was, what kind of a sexy shape can we come up just by unbolting the stock Fiero parts and bolting on these sexy parts out of the fiberglass molds? This one is, we're not changing the body. The body is absolutely exceptional. We're not going to change one bit of the lines of the body. But what we are going to do is build a chassis to suit the body. Fair enough?
That's right.
Okay, not exactly easy, but in the mix, and we're going to detail this technically a little bit later in the show. The only way, this is actually brilliant. The only way this really works out, and it's kind of a blessing from Fiero and General Motors. I'm sure they didn't mean to plan this back in 1984 through 88. Yeah, I'm sure Fiero didn't plan it. But what they did with the Fieros is the engine is mid-engine, meaning it's behind the driver and passenger in front of the rear axle. However, what they did was they turned the engine sideways. We used to call them sidewinders in the old days, but I guess that term is long gone, or have you heard that before?
I've used that term a lot of times.
Okay, well, it's because you and I are both old.
Yeah.
But
transverse is what they use.
Right, it's a transverse engine. The engine is mounted this way, so you don't have to deal with all that length. This car, using the transverse V8 Corvette engine, has probably 6-7 more inches of legroom.
I think it's about 8 inches.
Yeah, a lot more legroom.
It's quite a bit more than if you'd put the engine in north and south.
Right. So I've driven the car, and I can tell you that, boy, there's no problem at all. It is spacious and everything. I kind of said to myself, boy, what a brilliant idea to just turn that. And I wonder if Ford didn't do that years ago.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if the transaxle, transverse type transaxle technology wasn't where it is now.
Yeah, let's explain that, by the way. That's not as easy as it sounds. When you turn the engine sideways like this, you have to have some way then of sending the power to the transmission, which is also going to be kind of along side of the motor, and then send it to the differential and out to the half shafts and all that. If you didn't have all that, that's a major design job. If you didn't, like the Fiero certainly wasn't around back in 1964, 65, 66, 67. So, that technology would have been all fresh piece of paper design.
Well, yes, what is it, late 70s or so, they started doing transaxle front-wheel drive cars.
Right,
and that's where that technology came from.
Right, so this would have been well before that. So it really wasn't. As a matter of fact, Ford wanted it this size and this shape and everything for aerodynamic reasons. That's why they had to cramp the driver up and all that.
I remember reading an article written by Mark Donahue said on his GT40 driving experience was the last thing they put in the car was the driver.
Yeah, exactly, and there was barely enough space left for him, no question. And this is completely different because it is so roomy, and yet, again, I want to make that point over and over again. The beauty of this design is it's dimensionally correct. This is a GT. If I take a tape measure and put it on the floor and put it up here, it's 40 inches to the top of the car. That's why they were called GT40s. They were 40 inches to the top of the roof of the car. In any event, now, we've talked already for quite a while. I want to give you another look at the angle of the car. I'm going to ask Archie to turn it around because I want you to see it from the back. Those of you that are automotive racing history fans will really enjoy seeing how the back treatment of this car is, because it is, once again, dimensionally correct. It's a GT40 replica as far as size and shape and appearance. And the entire chassis, while it's engineered the same, of fully independent suspension, disc brakes all the way around, V8 engine, it's done quite differently and makes it a whole lot more practical.
I find it interesting that a car designed 40 years ago has such a modern, state-of-the-art, exotic car look. Hi, I'm Janine Lauschat.
And I'm Patty Borwitz, guessing that's one of the reasons the GT40 became a classic.
Along with winning Le Mans 3 times.
Let's return to Barrington and learn more.
As you look at the exhaust treatment on this, you might think this is exotic, cool stuff from 2004, which is the year that we're shooting this piece. As a matter of fact, this is how Ford did it back then.
Oh yeah, the center exhaust and a bundle of snakes. That's what the Ford GT40 was famous for.
You're exactly right. As a matter of fact, Ford started that whole business with their Indy cars, where they actually had the cylinder heads reversed, so the intake side was the exhaust side, and it was a bundle of snakes on top of the V of the engine, so they'd all come out the exact same length and came out in the back, some of them in a pair and some of them in four, and they did the same thing with the GT40s. The reason the back of the car looks the way it does, and boy, am I reaching back a long time now, it was called the Cram effect, K-R-A-M-M-E, as I recall, the Cram effect. And believe me, car companies went crazy, tried to figure out how to get these things to go through the air quickly and how to not disturb the air very much, and at the same time, how to not lift the cars off the ground. And this was the thinking at the time, and still pretty effective. These cars did run, by the way, folks, just so you understand. I'm going to say the name of the straightaway wrong like I always do, but I'm not French. I always call it the Mulsanne straight. I assume it's probably Mulsanne. Am I right? I don't. Who knows, right? Okay. Everybody, if you're familiar, it's a 4.5 mile long straightaway, part of Le Mans, and this car did run over 240 miles an hour at night down the Mulsanne Straight. Pretty impressive.
Oh yeah.
So the aerodynamics were right on the car, and this car is, again, true to all of the aerodynamics. As a matter of fact, if you come up here, Chuck, is this visible in the camera shop? What we've got here is a piece of aluminum that is that visible at all? Can you see that, Chuck? Okay. What we've got there, that was the original quick connect fuel filters, and you wanted the car so dimensionally correct that you wanted to leave those in, even though they're not functional. You couldn't really do that on a street car. They'd never let you drive it on highways, you know.
Well, yeah, they're non-functional, but we tried to leave it so it has that look.
You wanted it accurate. This is the way the GT40 looked. A couple of other things, too, and I should have probably asked you this on camera because probably the door is locked, but can you open the door from this side? Because I don't know if this is real visible to the audience or not, but these doors are cut way into the top. And once again, remember, this was an engineering work of art. There is nothing on this car that wasn't done for a reason. Just like the Mercedes 300 SL gull-wing coupe, the gull-wing doors were a necessity because of the full space frame under the car and the extremely high door sill. These cars also had high door sills because they were, in fact, monocoque construction. Mm-hmm. And once again, how do you get people in and out of it when they've got to kind of climb over a high sill? And the gull-wing Mercedes was done that way. If you would, can you open the door here? I want the audience to see how this one works. Once again,
my remote on the other side.
You left the remote on the other side. Yeah. Chuck, is that visible at all, that the top of the door actually forms part of the roof to make it easier to get in and out of, especially in the original really tight quarters for the driver when it was originally the GT40 race car? There was no room to get in and out.
They came out through the roof, really.
Yeah, it was very, very difficult. So this is all, once again, kept dimensionally correct. Even so much, now, I'm going to lean on Archie a little bit because he's really fastidious and meticulous about this thing, making it dimensionally correct GT40. But there were some things about the GT40 that could have really been improved for street use. For example, if you would close the door, I'm not taking a chance on your work of art here. Oh boy, apparently he doesn't care. Okay. Archie, I know that you're all excited that you have got the windows also dimensionally correct, and the fact that they had a hatch cut in the side and a little plastic thing that opened for ventilation and all that. That's wonderful for a race car. How about thinking about electric windows?
I don't know about electrics, but the next car I'm going to do roll downs. I've got a plan for the roll downs.
You're going to surrender a little bit?
Yeah. Well, the original windows on the cars were screwed in too. You know, they weren't glued in like these are. They had a screw about every 2.5 inches that screwed the windows into the car. And I've seen those at shows, and I wasn't impressed, so I glued these windows in. But I'm working on a window mechanism for the next car.
All right, because there are differences between race cars and street cars, and as wonderful as the race cars look and as sexy as they are, and Chuck, I don't know, can you get a shot kind of the body lines? This thing really is, the GT40 was a really sexy car. As sexy as all that is, the original car had these for windows, and they were nothing more than vents, and did not have air conditioning.
Oh no, they didn't have air conditioning and didn't have heat. They didn't have heat, and of course they didn't have a radio.
Exactly, so we don't really care about race car drivers, do we?
No, not a whole lot.
No, take the piece of equipment out and go as fast as you can. So there are some differences in street cars, but Archie, like I say, it is really important to him to keep these things dimensionally correct. Anything we haven't said outside, because I want to give the audience, I want to talk a little bit further, I want to take it inside the shop and talk a little bit further about the way the engine and driveline is laid out and why it has, why this is now a practical GT40. And I promise you folks, the original GT40 would not have been a practical street car. That's why we only made 31 of the darn things. Anything we haven't mentioned out here that we should take care of out here?
No, I think we're doing pretty good. I think you've got it pretty well covered.
you know what we haven't done? I want to change the car one more time. Hate to do this to you, but I want to change the car one more time because I don't think we've given them a side profile. What do you think? Because this is a nice background here, so let's do that. We're going to move some stuff around, folks. Don't go away. We're going to come right back.
It certainly is a pretty car to look at, but I don't think television really shows how low it is.
Remember, the reason they call it a GT40 was because the top of the roof was only 40 inches from the ground.
Put a tape measure next to your car to get a better feel for this dimension.
Let's check it out from the side.
Once again, the GT40 Ford was a car that looked just great from any angle. There are no bad angles on this car, and I want to talk for a minute before we go into the shop. Archie, as you know, Ford is not, and this really gets stupid, by the way, and not that Ford doesn't deserve it in some way. Ford is now, they now have a GT40 out, except they don't call it a GT40, they call it a GT. It is kind of a replica of the original car. However, because they are using the longitudinally mounted engine and know that there was no room in there for passengers, the new, I'm going to say GT40. Don't get, I know what it's not. It's GT, but I'm just going to say it so we don't get confused here. The new Ford GT40 is actually 7 or 8 inches longer, and it's higher. And the reason is because they really had to put people in the thing.
Yeah, you have to get a person in there if you're going to sell it to them. And Ford had to make the passenger compartment more comfortable and bigger and taller, a little bit taller and longer, so that people could actually drive the car.
You're exactly right. And by the way, when I said this gets stupid, how can I do this? In fact, you must know something because you've been involved with kit cars for a long time. You must know something about this. All of the warring that goes on between the guys that build replicas and the car manufacturers like Ferrari and the lawsuits that have been flying around. You must be somewhat familiar with that.
A little bit, yeah.
All right, well, Ford got all pushed out of shape some years ago. I remember seeing the magazine articles about it. They got all pushed out of shape because of the Cobra replicas. Not that Ford was ever going to make another Cobra again, but all of the Cobra replicas, and these guys couldn't call them Cobras. They had to call them, a variety of other names. It got all goofy. And I was a little pushed out of shape at Ford in that because I felt they should have been flattered by the attention. Agreed?
Right, I agree there.
Right. It is. I mean, when you have a time-honored design, something that has worked over decades, you ought to be flattered that people want to recreate that look and all that. And that's how I would have hoped that they would have seen it. They didn't, because I'm sure that they've got bean counters in the departments. So, that's our name, whatever. So guess what, folks? Ford's GT40, they are now producing a new one. And somebody else registered the name GT40, so Ford can't even use the name of their own car. Not that they didn't deserve it a little bit, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's kind of a turnabout, isn't it? Turnabout's fair play.
Turnabout is fair play. So the new Ford is just called the Ford, and it's a great car, by the way. Wonderful, wonderful car. I'm very enthusiastic about it. I love that double overhead cam 4-valve per cylinder V8. I love that it's supercharged and all that. But make no mistake about it. And it's beautiful, but it is not dimensionally accurate of the original GT40s.
Well, it's a retro of the old GT40.
It gives it kind of the look and all that,
and
but in a more practical package.
If you can afford it, it's a great package.
Oh yeah,
I think.
about 150 Gs.
You're
talking about very, very big money. In fact, you must be impressed at what's going on out there in the exotic car market. That Chrysler now with I'm trying to think of the. They say it's ready for production if there's enough demand. The V12 4-turbocharger, 4-intercooler, 850 horsepower, mid-engine. Have you seen this one?
No, I haven't.
Oh, yeah, it's awesome. And they say they're going to sell it for somewhere around $475,000, $450,000 a copy. They say they can get halfway between the Enzo and the GT Ford. One would have never guessed that the new Porsche, trying to think of the latest one with the V10 in it, is like $440,000. That's way beyond what any of us can do.
It's not in our world.
Yeah, it's not. I'm glad they're there, though. I really am. I'm glad they're there. They're fun to look at. It's like great Rembrandt paintings and all that. I'll never be able to afford one, but I'm glad they're there and they're fun to look at.
Them.
Sure like to look at them. It's the same thing. But for guys that have their feet firmly planted on the ground and have to work for a living and all that, there are ways to do it, and in some ways, pretty cool, maybe even better in some ways, because I really, really like the transverse V8 in here and the fact that it remains dimensionally correct. I think that's pretty cool. Now, I think while I'm out here, Chuck, make sure you show the audience the front and the rear wheel. These are all-wheel disc brakes all the way around, fully independent suspension all the way around, transaxle in the back, and of course Corvette powered in a dimensionally accurate GT40. And I think it's time for us to go inside and look at this thing technically a little bit, unless I've left something out that you're proud of. And believe me, by the way, that's the reason he doesn't want to give Chuck his dues on his car because he's got a great deal of pride and ego in the work that you do, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Chuck is just like I am. We both like our car no matter what.
Exactly, and it's different approaches, but great results on both of them. In any event, we are going to go inside the shop now and take a little closer look, and later on, I'm going to do some driving in this.
Leave it to Bill to figure out a way to get to drive it.
But first, he wants to explain the technology a little more.
Well, this will give you a little bit of the idea of what the problem is. Now, I will be the first to concede that we're giving to you at a distorted perspective because the engine is much closer to you than the car is. But this is as good as we can do on Access Television. Come on, we're not NBC. We don't have an overhead camera. What I wanted to point out was this is a small block Chevy, but it'd be very similar to a small block Ford. The dimensions are pretty much the same, and mounted in the longitudinal position, meaning the engine is going forward and backward. And this is not quite the approximate position. It actually has to go forward a little bit more to where the original GT40 motor would have been in the chassis. And I had to move it back just a little bit because, Archie, I would like you to open the door and show the audience, move the engine then into the correct position. Can we do this without, I don't want to damage your work of art here. Don't scratch the car, whatever you do. Go ahead and move it forward just a little, probably about there. Right about there. All right. Chuck, is it visible from your camera shot that you cannot see the seats now, the backs of the seats? All right. This is what Ford had to work with back in 1964, 65, 66, and 67. They had to move the driver and the passenger seat forward enough to where the back of the seat was here, and yet the rest of the car had to stay the same. There just was not enough room for a driver and passenger in an acceptable position for street use. And that's what I kind of think is the brilliance. So once again, as you know, if you've been watching Motorsports Unlimited for any length of time, I'm very high on using the Fiero components for a variety of reasons. First of all, the engineering was right to begin with as far as exotic cars are concerned, in that it had the fully independent suspension and four-wheel disc brakes and a mid-engine and all the rest of it, which are all, I can't think of, very few exotic cars are not made that way. So it had all the basic engineering of the exotic car, it just didn't have any real horsepower. And of course, by putting in the Corvette engines, you get the real horsepower. But here was what the designers from Ford were faced with. Of course, we don't really care that much about a race car driver. They get paid big money to take these things and go fast them. And quite frankly, they don't care about them. Once the adrenaline rush is going and all that, and they're in their compartment, they want to be locked in there like a gun in a holster anyway. So it works out fine for them. But this is not what you do with a street car. Now, Archie, if you can you roll it back carefully? Please don't take a chance of scratching your car. Just roll it back carefully. Can we on camera open the rear, or we can do that on camera? All right, I want to show you the way this one is done. And once again, this is that brilliance of the Fiero design, in my judgment, is what makes Chuck's car such a great car, and all of these Corvette-powered Fieros. Now, Chuck, you have to tell me, is it visible that engine is now this way, that it makes sense to the audience? Okay, I don't know if our shot, I would love to have an overhead camera for some of this stuff. It would have been great. Anyhow, the engine is turned sideways in the chassis, so it's mounted this way. The rear axle is just behind it, and the passenger and driver seat. Now, Chuck, if you would pull your shot back just a little bit so that the audience can get a perspective of the engine, rear wheels, and driving compartment. So we end up really with kind of the same driving compartment as you have in a Fiero.
Well, yeah, it's the same driving compartment you have in the Fiero,
You don't have to shorten it at all?
The roof is just a little lower.
Okay,
No,
but
the passenger compartment's identical, leg room and seat position.
All right, what I want to do now is, I hope this makes sense to you folks. We've got the Corvette engine mounted transversely sideways, so it doesn't have to push the driver and passenger forward, so we end up having the seat and the driver and passenger back out. We've got comfortable seating area using the Fiero basic design. And I want to come back now. I think we've got a raw chassis here, and show you a little bit about dimensionally inside, you keep the Fiero legroom and all that. I hope this makes sense.
It makes perfect sense to me. I just wonder why Ford didn't do it that way back in the 60s.
Well, let's not forget about that all-important transaxle technology that makes the transverse engine position possible.
True. If Pontiac hadn't created the Fiero with all the clever engineering pieces, this car wouldn't be possible.
That's true. The beauty of the Fiero was in its engineering and the fact that they were mass-produced, not particularly popular, and are available for almost no money.
The perfect basis for a hot rod. Let's learn more.
Now we get to the hard part. When you do the V8 Fieros, Chuck, if you can get shots of any of this structural work that's put in, none of that is necessary. The only problem that you have on the original, in fact, the original Fiero has, if you notice this piece of framework here, the original Fiero, I believe, has another piece further up. Does it not, Archie?
That's correct. It has another rail that goes right through here with a shock tower here.
Right, so the original shock towers can't be used, the original upper rail can't be used and all that, and still fitted inside the dimensionally correct GT40
Right,
body. Okay.
right.
So now it does get hard. Now all this stuff has got to be built and everything. It's not as simple as the, sticking the Corvette motors in the Fieros. On the other hand, the good thing about this, and Chuck, I don't know how good you're going to be able to get this. This is the original, down here, can you see where my fingers are, Chuck? This is the original back section of the cockpit of the Fiero. This is the original tunnel. Is that visible in the shot, Chuck? This is the original tunnel. It goes all the way forward to the front. Can you see any of this, Chuck? Probably not. Huh? Yes, a little bit maybe. Okay, this is all the original firewall of the Fiero, and the tunnel, nothing has been shortened. So it has the roominess of the Fiero, but still the dimension, you kind of wonder why Ford didn't do that. Well, because they didn't have that transaxle technology and all that stuff too, probably. Right. But this, so we end up with the interior space. Well, I'm guessing now that I think of it, all of those Fiero interiors, the custom interiors and stuff that are available, aftermarket stuff, that should all fit in here then.
Yeah, it should. Some of the
he's wrinkling his nose because he doesn't like the idea. He wants it to look like GT40, right?
Yeah, we have the inside door panels, of course, are going to be GT40 door panels, and the original carpeting. For example, this car I have here, I have original Fiero factory carpeting. The shape of it is the same carpeting and everything. You could use the original console, but you'd have to modify it.
What do you have?
Well, the reason you have to modify it is because this area of the chassis and the cowl area of the chassis are lower. We had to lower those to bring it down to the right dimensions.
But how does that affect the console?
Well, the console on the Fiero comes up the back here.
Oh, okay. You're not talking about the length of it. You're talking about the height of it.
The height of it, yeah.
Okay. So again, we mentioned this a year ago when we took just a quick sneak peek at this when it was still under construction. We said those are hard though. The Fiero and the Finale, or the Finale and the Fino, those are easy. This one's hard because you actually do have to build a chassis. But again, one of the things that needs to be pointed out here, other than the roof is a little lower too, I'm looking, it seems like?
Yeah, the roof's probably about 4 inches lower than the stock Fiero roof. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so it's a lot lower. So none of that roof structure from the Fiero is usable.
A stock Fiero stands about 45 inches tall, and we want to get down to 40 inches.
GT40.
So use a few of it.
Okay, but interestingly enough, even though a lot of the structure has been changed, pretty much the same basic layout as far as I'm noticing. The transmission mount, meaning the engine cradle, that seems to be the same. I'm seeing, Chuck, you probably can't see this down here, can you? Is that visible? You can see that? I see this looks like an entirely stock subframe from the Fiero.
Yes, that's a Fiero engine cradle there.
Engine cradle or subframe, as I might call it. And those subframe mounts, that looks standard.
This across here, yes. This is all from basically this level down, everything's stock.
Okay, and what about in the back? Because that also looks
this is the stock Fiero frame rail back to here.
So the cradle mount in the back is stock.
That's right. That's
all
right.
Because the reason I'm getting this is important, folks, because if you've got to re-engineer all that stuff, you end up with alignment problems and all that sort of thing. So this is already done by General Motors, and they kind of do it right.
Yeah, my red car here, we just did a wheel alignment on it the other day, and it's all factory specs on the wheel alignment on it.
Okay, so all of those kinds of specifications would all be the same as the Fiero.
They're all going to stay the same.
Now, how about on the front? Let's take a look up there. See what stays. Please, Arch, come on up. Okay, it looks like I'm trying to think where the steering rack would mount. That looks like that's the same. That's all stock. Chuck, is that visible at all? That cross member? You can't see it. Okay, the cross member for the steering rack. That's all stock and in the stock position.
That's right. It's a stock cross member. We do put tubular A-arms and coilover suspension and stuff on, but we use the stock cross member and the stock rack.
Now, do you have to put the tubular parts on there, or is it something you do because you want to make it lighter and stronger and all that?
I put them on because the front and rear clip both open, and it's easy to see the suspension components, so it just looks better.
Okay, but what I'm getting at is the original components could work, and then you'd have all the original factory specifications as far as geometry and all the rest of it.
Yeah, And all the tubular aftermarket stuff is made to those same specs.
Made to the same specs. Okay, so it doesn't alter any of that. So, because it's important when people want to build a car that goes straight afterwards,
Yeah.
And that's kind of a real hard thing. It's not as easy as it sounds. This is one that's under construction. There's a couple more things I want to do. Matter of fact, Archie, you've got a piece of the top. Can we throw that in position? Just give you the idea. Yeah, no, please go right ahead. I want to give just an idea in case oftentimes when we do something like this, it is really not quite visible what the audience is looking at, and he's got a piece of the top that we can kind of lay in position. So hopefully the chassis makes more sense to you then. Yeah, I'll give you a second. If that's enough. I just want to give the audience an idea of what they're looking at here. All right, hopefully that's a little bit clearer, folks. That's a little bit better. And this is the doorway that cuts into the roof of the car. And by the way, this is exactly the way the GT40 did it, again, so that they could get now on the original GT40, by the way, all of this, what we now have here is a square tubing structure. All of this was folded up aluminum, came up probably just as high as this, maybe even a little bit higher, was folded down, then the inside came up real high inside because, again, you were depending on folded up aluminum for chassis rigidity. So all of the airspace, not needed by the driver, all of the airspace is kind of filled up with folded aluminum. And Archie, if I'm not saying it right, please, you're the expert, tell me. Have I got it right?
Yeah, you basically got it right. They did have the fuel tanks out here in the outside pods too.
Which you also could not have in a street car.
You don't want that in a street car.
No, it's too dangerous. So in any event, that's a little bit about what this looks like. And I am getting anxious because we're getting closer and closer to me being able to drive the car and take you on a ride with me.
We'll take you on a ride in a moment, but first Bill wanted to point out one more thing that helps make the Pontiac Fiero such a desirable basis for a street rod or a sports car.
Factory components are much less expensive than aftermarket parts, so if you can use factory stuff to improve your performance, you can do it inexpensively.
As I've mentioned several times, one of the things I like about using the Fiero as a basis for all of these kind of projects is the interchangeability of standard parts. The reason this is important is because when you go to aftermarket companies for this stuff, it gets very, very expensive. If you can find stock pieces out of the General Motors or Chrysler or Ford parts bin and use those rather than the handmade aftermarket parts, you can cut the cost of building a vehicle substantially. Now, this is the original Fiero brake calipers. Is this a front or a rear?
That's a rear rotor.
Rear rotor. And were they the same for the front?
Yeah.
Same diameter, everything?
Same diameter, same composition, same thickness.
Okay, so this is the original Fiero, and if you notice now, the one behind it is the one that he's got on the GT40, and I think Chuck's got those on his cars too, right?
Yeah, and I've got them on several of my other cars too.
Okay, now, obviously, it's much bigger diameter. That's quite clear, so you got more sweep area for the rotor, so you're going to have substantially greater brakes, and if I turn it sideways, you can see that this is also a vented rotor, whereas the original Fieros are not vented rotors. And if you also notice, now we should have probably gotten a regular Fiero caliper. This is also not a Fiero caliper. What caliper is that?
It's a Camaro, a mid-'80s Camaro.
All right, so these are all stock pieces that nearly bolt into the Fiero.
They do bolt in. The rotor is a Chrysler LeBaron. And,
That's odd that a Chrysler LeBaron rotor would bolt onto a Fiero.
Yeah, but it's the same bolt pattern, and we have an adapter that mounts the caliper assembly around in the right place on the rotor. So
okay,
it's all
so we're all using. So it's all. If a person wants to, you can do it from the junkyard.
Yeah.
My point is that it can be done inexpensively when you don't have. And I will tell you this: I drove Chuck's car recently, and we came off the highway at well, no, I can't say that. We were going fast, and the thing that really impressed me. Boy, does that thing have brakes. These things are awesome. That's a light little car, and by putting these kind of stoppers on it, that was as impressive to me as the power was.
Yes, it really stops you. It'll make your eyeballs bleed.
Yeah, it really will. What for those that are into road racing, boy, what a combination. And again, all out of the factory parts bin, so it's not going to cost an arm and leg. I mean, you get some of these aftermarket brake systems, you can spend $5,000 no problem at all. Right. And by going to the junkyard and pulling out old parts and everything for a couple $100, you can put it together. And if you want to be factory fresh and go and get the right pieces brand new from the factory and everything, you spend it, but nowhere near the kind of money you have to spend in an aftermarket house. I'm sure you know all that.
Right. Somebody can put a system like this on all four wheels of the Fiero with the Cadillac rear calipers that include the handbrake. or the handbrake.
And that's not a small thing, by the way, because the car with fully with the disc brakes all the way around, the disc is really hard to make a handbrake work. Corvettes struggled with it, and Cadillac struggled with it, and other companies did, and that's probably the reason you use the Cadillac rear rotors, right, or brakes.
We use the Cadillac rear caliper, and and you still have your handbrake capability with it, and you can build it all with fresh parts from the local auto parts store for less than $1,000 all 4 wheels.
So it's and if you go to the boneyard, you can do it for a couple $100. Yeah. So again, Chuck is wrapping me up here, but I think this is, you find this over and over again with the Fiero stuff, is that parts, bin, interchangeability, Beretta brakes, stuff like that, you can substantially improve the car without spending a fortune.
It seems that's one of the major compelling elements for using the Pontiac Fiero as a basis for your project. It's light, features advanced engineering, and coupled with parts bin shuffling, can match some very expensive exotic cars.
Ah, yes, the ingenuity of American enthusiasts. Of course, and this is the part Bill's been waiting for, the most important part. How does it work?
All right, we're inside the GT40 now, and it's real cramped here against the shoulder, as I would expect it to be, but it is real long. I don't know if Chuck can show you that at all as far as the leg room is concerned. As a matter of fact, I can barely touch the pedals. Archie is a lot bigger guy than I am, and he doesn't have the seat adjuster in it right now, so it's a stretch for me. Believe me, there's no legroom problem in this thing at all. One other thing, if you look at the dashboard, this is not a Fiero dashboard at all, so this must be something that's part of the GT40 thing, because I've never seen a Fiero dashboard that looked like this, so this must be what the GT40 replicas. I'll ask Archie about that later. Let's fire it up. Okay, fires up like a small block Chevy, just like I would expect. Putting it in first gear, feels very much the same. And I don't know this area at all, so apparently I'm driving down a blind way here. I thought there may be a street this way. Let me just see here. Maybe not. Maybe there is. Maybe not. No, there's no street. Okay, I have to go the other way. Sorry, folks. God, I'm glad Archie's not seeing where I'm taking his car. It is remarkably very much like a Fiero. And again, I'm not really used to the real Fieros. I'm used to the V8 Fieros. It reminds me very much of the regular normal V8 Fiero. The controls fall readily to hand. Everything works as you might expect it would work, because it's a everything factory designed as far as all the engineered running gear and all that. Car does feel a little bit lower, but that's got to be just a feeling of the low roof, because everything else is the same. Of course, that's always the fun part of having a car like this, is jumping on it a little bit. I don't want to abuse his car, though. This is his work of art. Now, Chuck is pointing at something. Just keep going? Okay. I'm not sure you got the...
First right-hand turn.
Okay, Chuck is trying to tell me first right-hand turn. All right. Apparently he's familiar with this area right here. Oh, up there. If you turn around and show the audience, Chuck, I'm not stupid here. I know we're on backlight. That's okay. Show the audience that the first right turn, it's not exactly like city blocks out here in Barrington. Oh, I see. The green sign? Okay, you can come back to me now. We've got this thing on backlight. We're still struggling with figuring out what the best way to shoot these interior shots with. The problem we have is if we set the camera on backlight, then you can kind of see me and see the interior components that we're trying to figure out and all that. But unfortunately, it blows the background out, so you can't see that. In about a moment, I'm going to have Chuck change it so that you can see outside a little bit. Great deal of frontal room, view. As far as that, the view is quite unobstructed. The hood line is actually lower in the front. I'll have to ask Archie about that. The hood line seems lower in the front than on a normal Fiero. There seems to be more, or maybe it's the fenders are raised slightly. And by the way, the cool thing about this one doesn't have it, but these things, because they are all our Fiero components and all that, you can put air conditioning in these things. And believe me, they need it. It is a hot day today. All right, I have to ask Chuck, which way now, Chucky?
At the light, turn right.
At the light, turn right. Okay, I'll tell you what I want you to do. Just go ahead and do it while we're doing it. Go ahead and push the backlight button so we can kind of show the audience where we are. I assume that changes everything. Does it want a neutral density filter? Sorry about all this techno jargon, folks, but you might as well know that that's how television is done. What do you think, Chuck? We got it? Yeah. Okay, now go ahead and point forward. I'll tell you, folks, this it's a good feeling. When I say it feels like a Fiero, remember, the only Fieros that I'm used to, that I know, I'm not sure if I ever, yes, I have driven stock Fieros, but most of the ones that I recall are the V8 Fieros, and this one feels very much like that. You are not, turn here, Chuck, or no?
Turn right.
Okay. And by the way, as long as we're going forward, I hope the audience can see that, we've got a lot of front area here. I should say the view to the ground is more open than it is on a stock Fiero. But the rest of it, the shift controls, the components, the feel of the car feels very much like every other V8 Fiero that I've driven. All right, folks, I'm here in traffic waiting to get out, and it's really interesting. The cars all, and Chuck, if you point out there, the cars all slow down to look, and it keeps me from getting a spot in traffic to get out. But fortunately, I got enough smoke in this thing to pull out any place I want to. Sorry about that, Chuck. That's always the fun part on a car like this. You can go back to the front again, Chuck. And is this, I forgot where we turned left. You'll have to tell me if this is it. I think it was a stoplight.
You must have turned around.
Yeah, I did. Must be the stoplight.
Yes.
Something I spotted that I really wanted to go back and just take a quick peek at. I haven't seen it in many, many years. This is kind of one of the fun things about whether you're on a motorcycle or on an exotic car, taking a ride in the country on a sunny day, is it's really interesting the things that you spot. You can come back to me, Chuck. Now, if you saw Chuck Hitzenthaler right now, if you saw the cameraman, you would really appreciate these shots even more. He's literally laying on his back on the passenger seat with his knees on the dashboard because we're using a wide angle lens because we're trying to show you as much as we can of the cockpit, and this is a very small car and we're very close together. So this isn't easy, folks. I hope you appreciate these shots. The guy in front of us can't get his eyes, I wish we could get a shot of that. He can't keep his eyes off the rear view mirror. He's eating the car up. This is a nice car to show off in. Chuck, you can go back to the front because I'm looking for something. I hope I'm on the right road. I don't remember exactly where we turned. We may be lost in the country. I hope Archie's got lots of gas in this thing. Chuck will only let me take those in-car shots for so long, and I turn around and I see the agony on his face. This is a lot easier on him. The car is absolutely civilized. Does absolutely everything it's supposed to do, does it the way it's supposed to. There's what I was looking for. This is pretty cool. This is pretty cool. This won't mean anything to kids these days. In fact, I would venture to say youngsters these days have never even seen these cars. We have two examples of what I consider the finest engineering job done on an automobile ever. And Chuck, can you see it? We're talking about the Volkswagen Beetles there. That is so cool. We've got two of them sitting on the side of the road, and I don't think, you couldn't go down a city block in Chicago without spotting those things, and now you almost never see them anymore. It's really amazing. I'm sure Archie wouldn't appreciate me taking his car through the gravel road, but I just couldn't resist those Beetles. And this car does give that kind of confidence. I don't even think of it as what it looks like. It looks very exotic. It is exotic. But on the other hand, it's quite easy to drive and quite normal to drive, and a great deal of fun when you stick your foot in it. Having the Corvette motor is always a pleasure, always a joy. I think I remember, Chuck, I got to go left up here, right? This is Northwest Highway? Yeah, okay. You have to kind of be careful how you position yourself here, because the car, like all mid-engine cars, rearward visibility is difficult. It's not as bad as the Countach was, or the Diablo, I should say. The Lamborghini Diablo I drove. This one is better than that, as far as rearward vision and all. That's the fun part. Got a 5-speed trans if you were counting. And now I'm keeping a lookout for Archie's entrance. It's actually a little hard to find. This is a very rural part of Barrington. You kind of have to know where it is.
Please remember, this was all taped in Barrington, Illinois, nearly 10 years ago. V8 Archie moved to McChesney Park near Rockford, Illinois, some time ago.
We've got the turn right up here. You can show the audience, Chucky. Fun car to drive, a real head turner. Turn heads continuously.
That's way more than enough fun for one day, Bill. Time to get back to work.
Work? Is that what he calls it?
Have I got a great job or what? This was really fun. And you talk about a head turner. This is a head turner. In fact, it made it difficult. Archie, come on in here. This is yours. I don't want to take credit for it. Come on, all the way over here. It actually created a little bit of a problem from time to time because the people are so busy wanting to see the car. I'm waiting for a break in traffic, and they're like standing on the brakes. I can't get out. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's been happening to me for years.
Oh, I'll tell you, it's great. It was great fun, and I thank you for that. Now, there's a couple little changes that he's coming. You personally like these wheels, right?
Oh, I love these wheels.
But you're a little bit younger than me.
Not a lot younger than you.
Yeah, you're a little bit younger than me because, Chuck, if you pan your shot up there, those are the wheels that are going on it, and that's what I like. And the reason I like those is because that's a replica of the original GT40 wheels, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Those wheels are made in England now, and it's a replica of the Hallebrand wheel.
All right, and let me just say, Chuck, don't go away from those wheels. The original wheels were magnesium and light as a feather, but you really can't do magnesium wheels on the street because they deteriorate so badly. You can do magnesium centers, but you really can't put them on for the rims and everything because you won't get the beads to seal. It's okay for race car tires that are on there for 3 hours and changed, but not something that's going to be on there for 3 years, you know what I mean? So there are some changes for practical reasons, but they look the same.
Oh, that's right. They look the same.
Okay, tough challenge you took on to take a full-blown race car, an American icon, and turn it into a civilized street car, and I can tell you, you've done it. Congratulations.
I like doing stuff that's never been done before.
Well, I'll tell you something. He has a reputation for that. He's the guy that first, in fact, I will thumb this real quickly. I don't want to use up a lot of time. I'll thumbnail real quickly. The reason he got involved with the Fiero stuff was he had what, Camaro or Chevelle?
Two Camaros, yeah.
Two Camaros, big blocks or something?
Big block 67 and a 68 original Z28.
And how did you happen to all of a sudden discover the idea of using the Fiero?
When I put the big block into the 67, I took out a 327, and my brother had a Fiero, and got to looking at it, and that sucker will fit in there, so I did.
and then you fell in love with what you arrived at and dumped the Camaros and have been with this stuff ever since.
Yeah, when I drove that 327 Fiero around the block twice, which was a total of 8 miles in my neighborhood, and I pulled into drive and put both Camaros out in the yard for sale.
You said this is the way to go for hot rods.
Well, it was a blast.
That's all I can tell you. It's a blast. And by the way, we're in tight quarters. You can't see it. Chuck, try it. Shoot under our lights as you go that way. What have we got on the lift over there? And we're not going to use. I'll bet you can't get there, right, Chuck? If you can't get there, then we'll get it afterwards. You can get there. Okay, what's that on the lift?
That's one of the Phenos that we build, similar to the one that we had at the last show we did here.
Okay, but not the finale that I like.
Right. Well, I don't happen to have a finale here.
Okay, and Chuck, come all the way around again. And I hate to do this to you. Shoot under the lights over here, see if we can get a little shot of the silver one. These things really look cool in silver. I like the silver.
Yeah, the silver is always a good
got kind
color.
of a German look to it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And behind me, we've got a blue one. No finales, all Fiero, or Phenos.
Right now, yeah, they're all Phenos
What's
right
more
now.
popular?
Right now, it's the Phenos.
Really?
About 5 to 1.
Okay. Well, once again, we want to make the point. Those are easy. This is hard.
This is a little harder, yeah.
This is hard. Come on. But I'll tell you something. It's worth it. Talk about creating a head turner, something that turns heads wherever you go. Chuck, show the audience the car, and I'm going to step out of it because Archie's the one that ought to be with it. Don't run away, Archie. That's your car, buddy. You did it. Congratulations.
The creative genius of V8 Archie never ceases to amaze. He has a way of combining inexpensive parts that end up providing the performance and presence of the world's exotic cars. Unfortunately, as always, we're out of time too soon with only enough left to acknowledge the fine work of our award-winning production team, including Chuck Itzenthaler, Sue Cassanda, our webmaster, Frank Barbalace, Rena Borwitz, and Tom McGrady. Special thanks to JBTV's Jerry Bryan. Music is created for us by Fireside Recording Studio in Westchester, Illinois, and by independent artists Roger Pauley and Jerry Herbert. Of course, we have to take a moment to thank the stars of this edition of Motorsports Unlimited. Patty Borwitz, Janine Plashot, and our host, Bill Wildt. Me, I'm Samantha Bentley, wishing I had the ability to build something like that, but I think it would be hard on my nails. We'll leave it up to the guys. They'll take us for a ride when they're done anyway. Thanks for watching. See you next week.
That's the fun part. Got a 5-speed trans if you were counting.
While we check out a little more of the road footage of V8 Archie's masterpiece, let's not forget, May Chin worked on this production too.
You kind of have to know where it is. Yeah, fun car to drive. I enjoy it. We've got the turn right up here.
This program made possible in part by support from Jimmy's Red Hots, located on Grant Avenue and Pulaski Road in Chicago.
This program made possible in part by support from J.C. Whitney and Company, located just off I-80 at the Utica exit in LaSalle, Illinois.
Motorsports Unlimited is produced by Bill Wildt, president of the Motorsport Advancement Crusade.
This program made possible in part by support from Bridgestone Firestone and your local Bridgestone Firestone tire retailers.
This program made possible in part by support from ABC Auto Parts, located on Ashland Avenue at 138th Street in Blue Island, Illinois.
Motorsports Unlimited was created to raise public consciousness, understanding, and appreciation of the motorsport community and their activities. You can contact us by email at msutv.com, or you can write to Motorsport, P.O. Box 66242, Chicago, Illinois, 60666. We enjoy hearing from our audience. Please let us know what you think.
So that's it, another edition of Motorsports Unlimited and the lovely ladies of motorsports. And be with us next week because we'll have something real exciting. Bill Wildt's going to have the lovely ladies, and just about anything can happen right here on Motorsports Unlimited. Every week at this time, we bring you the best in motorsports. So be seeing ya. Bye-bye. And keep on rocking.